Okay, what I want to do now is walk step by step through homework number 7. Homework number 7 is an important assignment because it serves as something of a capstone for about the first half of the course, where we talk about supply, demand, equilibrium, and welfare, and also because it's a fairly complicated problem, and I want to make sure that we have had a chance to go through all the steps together. In the graph on the right, we have the supply and demand curve reflecting the information about labor supply and labor demand that's given in the table. And so what we're going to do is walk through step by step each of the questions. The first one says how many workers are employed in equilibrium, and then the second one asks what's the equilibrium wage. We can see that information from the table. If you look at what you're looking for is the wage at which the same amount of workers are demanded as that are willing to supply labor, and that occurs at 2,100 workers and $9 and a $9 an hour wage. Now, it's a helpful tip sometimes that if you want to see what the point on the graph is, just move your mouse over it and it will tell you. Labor demand point 2,100 is the quantity and $9 is the wage, and you can see right from the graph by scrolling over it with your mouse what the equilibrium values are. We're going to use that a little bit later on as we walk through some of the other questions. All right. So then question 3 asks, complete the table and complete the column in table 1 for wage minus business taxes. This is for a $1 tax placed on employers. And wage minus business tax, we go to this column here, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to put equals $7, or change that to cell D8, minus 1. So equals cell D8 minus 1. This is the wage minus the $1 that the workers would employers would have to pay in the face of the tax. So what we get here is if employers are willing to hire a worker at $7 an hour, in the face of the tax, their wage offer has to be $6 an hour. Now we just drag this down all the way to the bottom of the table, and I've set it up so that the demand curve that reflects the tax now appears in your graph on the right. So the dashed line represents the offers that employers are making to workers. The solid line represents what employers actually have to pay once you include the dollar that they have to pay in taxes. All right, so then the next question says, what is the new equilibrium wage? The new equilibrium wage, will scroll your mouse over the dot, and you can see that this occurs at about 2,010 workers and a wage of $8.30 per hour. So I'll go ahead and enter that in there. That was $8.30 an hour, and the new equilibrium quantity of employers is 2,010 workers, and the effective wage paid by employers is $9.30 an hour. Remember, because they have to pay the extra $1 in tax. Okay, now what happens when we place the tax on workers? Reading down to question 4. Well, here we see that the $1 tax placed on workers would mean that a worker who used to be willing to work for $7 an hour now demands an $8 wage because they only get to keep $7 of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that $7 wage, that's plus D8, and add $1 to it. Right? A worker now needs an $8 wage offer in order to accept the job. All right. Drag that down to all the cells, and the graph is set up to pop up a new supply curve reflecting the wages that employees need in order to accept a job offer. The solid blue line, of course, is what they get to keep, but the dashed blue line is what they need to be offered in order to accept the job. So looking at equilibrium in the face of a $1 tax on both employers and employees, which is how Social Security works right now. There's a tax on employers and employees. You see it come out of your paycheck. Your employer also has to make an equal payment to the government. When both taxes are in place, our $1 taxes on employers and employees leads us to a new equilibrium, and we'll scroll over that, of 1,950 workers employed at a wage of $8.50. So the new equilibrium wage is $8.50. The new equilibrium quantity of employment is 1,850 workers. And the new effective wage received by workers is $7.50. right? They only get to keep $7.50. Right? Here's the, I'm sorry, I typed in 1850. This should be 1950. Okay. Okay, so now the next question says, how much tax revenue is raised by the combined taxes? Well, there's a grand total of $2 in tax being paid for each hour and each employee. For the 1,950 workers, we have $1 being paid on behalf of the employer and $1 being paid on behalf of the employee, so that gives us a grand total of $3,900 in taxes. Okay, now how much of the tax burden is borne by workers? What you want to do here is compare how much were workers making before the taxes were put in place and how much were they making after. And what you see is that workers' wages have fallen from $9 to $7.50. So workers are bearing $1.50 of the tax burden, while employers saw the wage that they have to pay rise from $9 to $9.50. So they're bearing 50 cents of the tax burden. They're bearing $0.5 of the tax burden. What you can see then is that the tax burden is not distributed evenly, despite the fact that they are each facing a $1 statutory rate for the tax. What happens is wages fall by more than $1, and the wages collected fall by more than $1, and the wages paid rise by something less than $1 for employers. All right. So question 7 says, what happens if we put a minimum wage law in place? And suppose we set a minimum wage at $10. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go up back to the graph and work from the graph here and insert a line. Insert shapes, lines, and I'm going to insert a line right at $10. And I'm going to make that line, just to make it stand out a little bit here, let's make the line, how about bright green? And let's make it bigger. All right. So this green line here represents our minimum wage line. Okay. Now, the question 7 says, how many workers would then be hired at firms? How many workers would be hired at firms? Well, now, in the face of both of the taxes, workers, if firms have to make a $10 wage offer, effectively the payment that they have to make is $11. And we can find out how many offers they'd be willing to make at that wage if we scroll over here and look at the dashed line. The dashed line is the offers that they would be willing to make. They would be willing to offer 1,500 jobs at $10 an hour. Now, the next question is going to ask how many workers will show up to work if that's the case. And workers, remember, still have to pay their $1 in taxes, and so we scroll over here to the dashed line for workers. This is what the wage offers they're willing to accept. And at wage offers of $10, we see that 2,100 workers would show up in hopes of landing a job. So the minimum wage and the taxes, we're interested in the intersection of the green lines and the dashed lines. With the minimum wage, we have 1,500 job offers and 2,100 applicants. Go ahead and fill out question 7. This is 1,500 workers offered, and then 2,100 workers willing to work. Okay. Now, question 9 asks you to consider. Question 9 asks you to consider what happens if you could eliminate one of the 3 policies, either the employer tax, employee tax, or minimum wage, and then fill in the blanks. What I'm going to do real quick here is I'm going to take the graph and I'm going to drag it down so that it's on our screen. What happens if we eliminate the $1 tax on employers? Well, what happens if we eliminate the $1 tax on employers and we still have the minimum wage in place? And what we're looking at is the solid line for both the offer and the amount employers pay. And this says we would wind up with 1,800 workers. All right, the effective price would be the $10 minimum wage. The after-tax wage received by each employee will be $1 less. Employees, remember, get to keep 9. The number of workers employed is going to be dependent on how many offers are made, and this is going to be 1,800, which is an increase-decrease or no change from the answer in question 7. This is plus 300. Whoops. Okay, so we're up 300 workers. We're up 300 workers when we go from the 1,500 that were employed at the early minimum wage. Whoops, what happened? Put my line back. To the higher minimum wage. So now think about eliminating the $1 tax on employees. If we eliminate the $1 tax on employees, but in fact the employers still have to pay the tax, then employers are going to be making wage offers along the dashed line. Employees are going to be receiving wages along the solid blue line, or in the face of the minimum wage, they're going to be receiving exactly the minimum wage. So the effective price employers have to pay is going to be $11. They're going to make a $10 minimum wage offer and pay their $1 tax. Employees will receive the $10. They no longer have the tax. The number of workers employed is going to be 1,500, right? So the number of workers employed will be 1,500 workers, which is an increase or decrease from your answer in question 7. This is no change. Okay, so now what happens instead if we eliminate the minimum wage? If we can get rid of the minimum wage policy, what do we see? Well, here, the effective price the employers will pay each worker will be what we said before, $9.50. This is just the answers from our equilibrium in questions 7 and 8 before. So this is going to be $9.50 paid by employers. The after-tax wage received by each employee will be $7.50, $8.50 wage offer minus the dollar employee tax. The number of workers employed will be, as we saw before, scroll over here, 1,950. And this is an increase of 450 workers from what we had in question 7. Okay, so that's an answer to the solution. Now, what I ask you to do in question 10 is compare all of these policies, and if you could get rid of one, which one would you choose and why? It brings up some sort of interesting results when we think about what happens if we when we think about what happens to employment demand in the face of employer taxes, employee taxes, and a minimum wage. The ultimate answer to question 10 is a normative one, but I'll leave the rest of it to you. Thanks, and hope this is helpful.